Some people, and I call them punks, are the type of people that they're not going to lash out on the real world because the real world will f them up. So what they do is they lash out on the people that they know would never hurt them. That's why they punk. I was struggling. By the summer of 1975, LaBelle was hotter than July. The big time. What Sarah, Nona, and I had always wanted. What we had worked the sardine houses and the chitlin circuit to reach. But as happy as I was about our success, I also felt like I was being torn in half. Once we finished recording the new album, we would have to tour the country to promote it. When I told Armstead, he didn't say much. This is your decision, Pat. Now, let's not forget that Armstead is trickery. You're saying it's your decision, Pat, but your actions are showing differently because remember in the last video, he had admitted to enjoying torturing Patti LaBelle when it came down to their son. He understood that he was the primary caregiver for the son, and there were times that the son would show favoritism to the father. It hurt Patti LaBelle's feelings, but he loved it. So he's saying this is your decision, Pat. But do you really mean it? Like, I need my mate to tell me the truth. Okay, be supportive of my dream, but at the same time, it's okay to tell me how you feel. Of course, once we released the new album, we had to come up with a whole new stage show. One that would have people buzzing the way they had for our Nightbirds extravaganza. Our New York debut was at the Beacon Theater, which was broadcast live on the King Biscuit Flour Hour syndicated radio show. And once again, we gave our fans something to talk about. While our Nightbirds show featured spacesuits, this one featured feathers with costumes designed by Dorian Blakely. While Nightbirds showcased me fluttering down to the stage suspended by invisible wires, Phoenix put me in the spotlight, raised high above center stage by an 1,800-pound hydraulic lift, while Sarah and Nona sang, "Open your eyes, rise, Phoenix, rise." Even though our live shows were always full house affairs, after Lady Marmalade, none of our record releases caught the fire of our stage performances. A lot of it had to do with the tunnel vision of the music industry. Despite all the touring to promote the Phoenix album, it didn't match the success of Nightbirds. Neither did the final LaBelle album, Chameleon, which included a number of new songs written by Nona and showcased all new costumes designed by Norma Kamali. Wait a minute now. Norma Kamali? I think I got a couple of outfits from Norma Kamali. First, recording Chameleon was a nightmare. For me, that session was the straw that broke the camel's back. The project that signaled the end for Sarah, Nona, and me as a group. Before we went into the studio to record it, things were already tense. To add to the stress of being away from Armstead and Zuri, Chubby had been diagnosed with diabetes, the disease that would eventually claim her brother and sister. I couldn't even escape through the music anymore. As I told Sarah, Nona, and Vicky, I didn't mind singing the rock and roll songs, but I also wanted to include some of the music I loved, the ballads, the standards, the torch songs that have always touched me so deeply. They didn't want to hear it. At first, they didn't even want to include the one song I really wanted to record on the new album, Isn't It a Shame? When I Wikipedia them and found out that they were a rock group, I was taken aback, like, LaBelle's a rock group? To be quite honest with you, the only two songs I know from LaBelle that I know and enjoy is Isn't It a Shame and Lady Marmalade, because those are the songs that I felt I liked the most. And now I know they have other songs, but those songs didn't resonate with me the way that Lady Marmalade and Isn't It a Shame did. And plus, they didn't play that other shit on WKYS back in the day. To hear that they are a rock group and absorb it is strange to me, because I never thought of Patti LaBelle as rock. And to now hear that she basically was like, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to do rhythm and blues. That's what I feel closest to as a performer. And they're like, answer no. And now, thinking about Sarah Dash went on to sing with Keith Richards, who is the guitarist for the Rolling Stones, a rock band. And Nona Hendrix went on to sing Afropunk. Remember that album she had in like 1982 or 3 or something like that? That thing was phenomenal. You hear me? Dust to dust, bam to bam. Get a check, change your skin. Woo! Of course I see Patti LaBelle separating herself, because this rock and roll music isn't what I feel in my heart. I don't want to do this. And then to know that them hussies was fighting her on Isn't It a Shame? How is it that two people can laugh together, wanna die together? I know I ain't singing it right, but you know what the fuck I'm talking about. The only person besides me who was pushing for the song was David Rubinson, our producer. But he and Nona had such different visions for the album that she wanted him off the project. Once again, I gave in. I backed off and left David to win the fight all by himself. But it kept gnawing at me. At one point, I thought I had come up with the perfect solution for all of us. Since Sarah and Nona didn't want any part of recording any ballads, I could record a solo album when LaBelle had some downtime. Okay, I get it. I mean, that sounds feasible to me, because I don't want to sing that rock and roll shit all the time. Shoot, and I'm the voice of this joint. So I have to commend Patti LaBelle for being as compromising as she was. That way, everybody would get what they wanted. When I told Sarah, Nona, and Vicky my idea, they made me feel like a penny waiting for change. You would have thought I had suggested we go on stage, buck naked, and sing Surfing USA. There would be no solo album. Once again, I found myself attacking my sister, Barbara. So because I have found myself in this situation where people have had misplaced anger on me because I was the closest to them, and they basically knew that because I loved them, that I would not hurt them. Some people, and I call them punks, are the type of people that they're not going to lash out on the real world, because the real world will fuck them up. So what they do is they lash out on the people that they know would never hurt them. That's why they punks. It's kind of like when you find women that only hit men that don't hit women. What she was doing was she was taking her anger out on her family instead of the people who really deserved it. After the fight with Barbara, I started doing some real soul searching. I couldn't keep fighting the people I loved. I had to ask myself some hard questions, and I wasn't even sure I was ready to hear the answers yet. Why was I putting myself through this? What was it costing me? Was it worth it? Why did I care so much about what everybody else thought? Why was I so hung up on everybody liking me? Why couldn't I stand up for myself with anybody other than my sisters? The tension kept growing until everyone around us could feel it. There was a time when Sarah, Nona, and I shared the same dressing rooms, even when we were assigned 3 separate rooms. Even at the Met, there was a time when we ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner together. There was a time when we all even wore the same fragrance, Halston. But those times were behind us. Things came to a head one night in December of 1976 when we were doing a show in Cincinnati. Nona and I had a knockdown, drag-out fight in the hotel. I'm still not ready to talk about it, but suffice it to say it was ugly. Something happened to me that night I fought with Nona. I knew we couldn't go on that way. We owed it to our fans not to go on if we couldn't bring them all the love we had always brought to the stage. That's it, I told Armstead. I can't take any more. I'm quitting. I don't know if he believed me, since I had often told him I didn't know what I would ever do without Sarah and Nona. While I wanted to do a solo album, I never once thought of leaving the group and pursuing a solo career. By the time we left Cincinnati, everyone had heard about the fight, and the rumors were flying. We had a show in Baltimore the next day, and it was there at Painter's Mill Theater in the round that everybody fell apart. We were about to sing our next to last song, Can I Speak to You Before You Go to Hollywood, when it happened. The band was playing the introduction, and Sarah was standing there waiting for Nona to sing her opening line. The band kept coming around to her cue, but Nona never took it. She was just standing there leaning on her mic stand as the stage slowly turned around and around. I was sitting at the piano since my part didn't come until much later in the song. At first, I thought Nona was just adding more drama to our most dramatic number. But when she looked up and then suddenly walked off the stage and out into the audience, I knew something was wrong. I looked at Sarah. Sarah looked at me, and flustered, I finally spoke to the audience. This isn't my part, but I'm going to give it a try. Somehow, Sarah and I got through the song and headed backstage to wait for the encore, Lady Marmalade. Next thing I knew, Vicky was out on the stage. At that point, I was really confused. Vicky never took the stage, and then I heard her say it. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes tonight's performance. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I grabbed Ken Reynolds, our road manager, and started screaming. What does Vicky mean the show is over? It's not over. What's going on? Where's Nona? What happened out there? Why can't we do the encore? I'll sing it myself if I have to. Ken shook his head. It's too late. The lights are up and the audience is leaving. I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. All I knew was Nona was acting weirdly and with no explanation. It wasn't until later that I found out what Ken meant when he said it was too late. When Nona suddenly left the stage, Ken was alarmed. He sent Dickie, our stage manager, out into the audience to find her. Once Dickie got her backstage, Nona disappeared into the dressing room. That's when they heard the pounding. When it first started, nobody knew where it was coming from. Then they heard it again, only louder, and it was coming from Nona's dressing room. Ken tried to open the door, but it was locked. They called for Nona to let them in, but she wouldn't open the door. She didn't answer at all, and the pounding just got louder and louder. Ken had a roadie break open the door, and that's when they saw it, the blood. Nona had been banging her head into the wall. They had to call an ambulance to take her to the hospital in restraints. That night, everything collapsed. We fell apart. Nona had had some kind of breakdown. I flew home the following day. Vicky later told me after that horrible night, Nona went away to get some help. Vicky called a month or two later to say Nona was doing great. I couldn't have been happier for Nona, but there was a sadness too. Pause. For you to be friends with somebody from childhood and not know that they had the potential to hurt themselves in that way is very scary. We all knew we couldn't go on. LaBelle was finished. I felt like I had lost another sister. Two of them, really. And I had no idea what I was going to do with the rest of my life. A life I had never pictured without them. In the months following LaBelle's breakup, I was a basket case. I went into a serious depression. I had never even considered a solo career. As much as I loved to sing, just the thought of going on stage all alone without Sarah and Nona terrified me. Funny, but without really thinking about it, in the months following the breakup, I almost always wore black. I was in mourning. I had suffered a real loss in my life. I felt as if someone had died and something inside me had died too. Once again, I started taking my frustration out on Armstead. Our relationship was already shaky, and day by day it got harder to live together. I had gone from hardly ever being at home to being home all the time. I was so miserable thinking about my career. I'd find any little thing to fight about. That's you misplaced anger, bitches. It didn't matter how silly the point. I was ready to argue it down into the ground, and many a day I let Armstead have it with both barrels. When he refused to fight with me, which was 90% of the time, I got even more frustrated. It ain't nothing like being in a relationship with an old arguing bitch, I tell you. The people at Epic were thrilled about keeping me on their label as a solo artist.
I stayed right on the south side, made a left on MLK. What a